Hello, I'm old Mr. Kent, 82 years old, and on another morning e-trike ride. Although I have to admit that I had to vacuum the floor to help my wife out, and just plain lazy or worn out or something. So it's a little afternoon. It's not really, but I call it my morning trike ride because normally it's a morning trike ride. And the upcoming year, 2025, is just a day or so away while I'm making this video. And so I've got a few stories of New Year's that I can tell you. And by the way, I'm on my old ride now because I've got the fat tires on my trike, and it takes the bumps a lot better. So let's go ahead and get started. We'll go way back to when I was about 10 years old, and my older sister and her boyfriend, we lived in Seattle, and my older sister and her boyfriend went roller skating every weekend, every Friday or Saturday night. I can't remember which it was. And they were kind enough to take me. And of course, they had their own skates, and I just rented a pair. And I don't know, it didn't cost much, I can promise you that. And so we'd go every week. I could look forward to that, and they always took me in. So it was a fun thing to do. Well, so came New Year's Eve. They had a special session because normally, like on Friday night, they would go from 7 till 10, and so then you skated for like 3 hours, which was enough, really. But on New Year's Eve, they had a special double session, so you could go 7 to 10, but if you pay a little extra, you can stay until midnight and celebrate New Year's while you're roller skating. And so that's what they did. And remember now, I rented my skates. And so I got a pair of skates that apparently didn't fit like they should have. I think they were too small. In fact, that's what was wrong. So I skated, and then 10 o'clock came, and we had to clear the floor. And by the way, I'll stop right there and point out, this was in Renton, Washington. It was a special roller rink. I mean, it was called Rollerland. I got a couple of pictures that I found on the internet. And they had a guy that played the organ. They didn't play records. A guy sat behind a glass window in one of these great big fancy organs. And then you could even ask him to play your favorite song. And when you roller skate to organ music that's played right, it was fun. It was fun to skate to. And unfortunately, well, so as the years went by, unfortunately, after we were all grown up a little bit, the Rollerland roller rink, I mean, they had extra places. You could go to the main floor, or you could go into a little room, a practice room, or a smaller practice room. They had all kinds of things for teaching people how to roller skate and stuff. And so, and I'm sorry about the runny nose. And so, that's what it was. Well, so New Year's Eve, I'm skating, and the skates are too small. And by the time the 10 o'clock session ended, I could tell my toes were hurting a little bit. But I was only 10, 11 years old, and so I didn't care. So, so I kept skating, and then when midnight came, everybody celebrated the new year, and that old organ player, he played, you know, "Till all acquaintance be forgot," and so it was a real special time. when we got through, I went in, took off my rented skates, and my toenails were purple. And so I thought, that's, and they were hurting. And so I got home. Next day, they were still hurting, and I showed my parents, and they weren't too happy about it. And I don't know how long it took, but about 3 weeks, I would say, maybe longer. I can't remember back then. Anyway, the toenails got so bad that they came off. And so I was in bad shape for a while. When they finally came off, then that was that was a blessing. That felt better. So anyway, so that's my one of my New Year's stories that I don't think I've ever told you about that. With the rollout, and the interesting thing was, when the place burned down, the only person in the building, it was, I don't know what time it was, but there's a little news article about it. The only person in the building was the manager. And so that ended roller skating in Renton, Washington for a lot of people, because it was a wonderful place to skate. So that's one story. I got two more if you want to listen. I think I got two more. Let me see, there's that one. And isn't that strange how I forget things? Kind of aggravating. Kind of makes me angry. Okay, so we'll go to this one. And I got another one, but I can't remember what it was because I hadn't really planned on it. Okay, so we'll go to the next one. When I was in high school, and I buddied around with this guy named Henry, who didn't really turn out to be a friend, but that's all right. And we were active in Youth for Christ. And 1950, at the end of 1959, at the Christmas vacation time, got an awful lot of wind blowing. I'm going to slow down a little bit. Vacation time came, and so they held a great big conference back in Washington, D.C. And kids from all over the country went there. And what they did was I don't know how they did it, but they had about 3 or 4 trains coming from all directions, from out in Seattle where we were, all directions into Washington, D.C., which was where the conference was held. And so it took 3 days by train to go from Seattle to Washington, D.C. And my buddy and I, the reason we got to know each other is because both of our dads worked for United Airlines at SeaTac in the same office. And so because our parents worked there, then we could fly back to Washington, D.C., and all it would cost was the tax on the ticket. And you'd be on standby, if you know what that means. And so, excuse me. And so, his parents wanted him to go overnight. In other words, you take off in Seattle at 10 o'clock or whatever, and you get there, you get to Washington, D.C., another time. But what we did was when we took off, you had to switch flights in Chicago and then take a flight to Washington, D.C. Well, as it turns out, his parents had friends in Chicago, and so they picked us up, and we went to their house and stayed a day. In fact, I got to take a tour of the DeWalt, I think it's DeWalt factory, where they make tools and stuff. And so we got to do that. And then we took a flight. I don't remember how it went, but then we took a flight from there to Washington, D.C. And when we got to Washington, D.C., we were still a day ahead of everybody else. And we stayed in the Mangra Hamilton Hotel, which was a fancy, fancy hotel. And we were like on the 13th floor. And we took the letter writing material, made airplanes out of it, and watched them glide down into the court area. Anyway, so we stayed there, and since we had a day off, we rented bicycles and we went on all the tours and all that kind of stuff. Well, then they had the conference, and I've told this story before, just all the details. We were visiting a girl in the hospital who we had met, and then we had to walk home in the middle of the night to get back to our hotel, and and we had to go past the Capitol building, and so we had to use the restroom. And so, believe it or not, we couldn't get in the front door, so we went around the back, and we found an open door in the back, and so we quietly opened it up, and we looked around, and nobody was there. This was 1959, remember? And so we went in, walked down a hallway, around the corner, finally found a restroom. When we came out of the restroom, we heard footsteps. But they went on by, and it was like in the movies where you stand up against the wall. But they went on by, and so we got back, and then we attended the conference and all that. Okay, so it was December 31st when we flew back. Well, as it just turned out that when we got to the Washington, D.C. airport, it was just a few minutes before midnight. And so while we were there, they came over the speaker. They came over the speaker and said, it's now 12 midnight. And then they played some kind of music or something. And so it was now 1960. And so we got on the plane, and we had to transfer at Chicago. We got to Chicago, and while we were waiting for the next plane, it turned midnight in Chicago in a time zone, and so they came over the PA system and said, "Happy New Year, everybody! It's 12 o'clock, and it's now 1960." And so we got to celebrate. We were laughing, got to celebrate New Year's twice. And so then we got on the plane, and as we got on the plane, the stewardesses, they said, all these balloons are up all around in the plane. They say, yes, because we get to celebrate New Year's on our flight because we're going to a different time zone. And Henry and I, we looked at each other and we thought, this is the third time. So in 1960, I celebrated New Year's 3 times in the same night. And that's a true story. I don't know if anybody else has ever had that experience or not. But that's what happened. We got to do that. Now, if I can just remember, there was another New Year's story that I was going to tell. Oh, let me stop for a second. Let me think. I'll cut this part out. Just remembered it. Okay. So years later, you may remember, if you're over 35, you probably remember the Y2K panic. I panic when I can't remember things. but I remembered it. So this was in 1999, and they, about halfway through the year, they realized that they had to do something with all the computers, because, give you an example, I was a programmer for a while. If somebody gave you their birthday as 4/3/42, well, then you just put it into the computer, and it would automatically put a 19. And if it's only a 2-letter or 2-digit number, then you'd change it to a 4 by putting a 19 in front of it. That was programmed to all the computers. Lots of computers did that. And so, this would be government computers, power company computers. They all did the same thing. Well, so now that means after midnight on 1999, then if a little guy was born January 1st, 2000, but anybody, if they just put 2 zeros, it would put 19 like he was born in 1900. I don't know if you understand, but that's what the computer problem was. And so it wasn't really a real panic, but I think everybody, including myself, stayed up till midnight and watched the news after midnight to see if anything had crashed, or if the lights in the house went out, or because everything was computer controlled, even in 2000. So it was a real challenge to people all over the world who did programming, to make sure that everything was going to be right. Now there's a radio station in Fort Collins, Colorado, called WWV. It's the National Bureau of Standards, and you can tune it in on 2,500 kilocycles, and you can hear it ticking off the time, and set your watch to it and all that kind of stuff. Nobody does that anymore, but that station was used by everything, television broadcasting and everything like that. The time was always locked into that. So anyway, and they had to have that right. So anyway, that was the third story that I couldn't remember. I don't know if it's worth telling or not, but those are 3 New Year's stories that I wanted to tell and almost forgot one. So with that, I hope you had a nice Christmas, and I want to wish you a happy New Year, and God bless.